Let this darkness be a bell tower. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself into wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow, and to the rushing water, speak, I am.
Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nishant and welcome to the Nishant Garg Show. This is a podcast about helping you live a fulfilled life, and my job on this show is to invite the world-class experts to extract the practices, routines and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Today's guest is Shalini Bahl. Shalini is an award-winning researcher and founder of Know Your Mind, a social business with the mission of making evidence-based mindfulness skills widely accessible. Through her evidence-based customized solutions based on 15 years of research, Dr. Bahl provides business, education and political clients with the mindfulness skills they need to disrupt harmful default habits to cope with stress, become more resilient to life's obstacles, and live with empowered choice for personal and collective fulfillment. Her guided meditations and programs have had over 250,000 plays on the Insight Timer and Simple Habit app. She is a former successful entrepreneur and business professor, and her cultural experiences of living and working in various countries allow her to engage with diverse audiences, including CEOs and executives at Fortune 500 companies, college campuses, and students. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Shalini Bahl. Shalini, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be connected with you, and while doing the homework on your profile, I found that you have lived in India, Kuwait, and other countries. So I thought if you could start with your cultural living experience in those countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in India, in Delhi, and I know I share that with in common with you because you're from Delhi as well. So, and I am absolutely in love with India, partly because of my family, and I grew up there till I was 6 years of age, and then my parents and I moved to the Middle East in Kuwait, and which is where I got my schooling and till 12th grade. And even during my time there, I just loved going back to India. I was very close to my grandmother from my mom's side, and my aunt and my cousins. And so I just could not wait to every summer vacation go back and visit them. And then I went back to India to do my undergraduate degree. And then I was on my way to the United States after my undergraduate at Lady Shri Ram Delhi. I studied business there. I was in Kuwait when the Kuwait War happened, when Kuwait was invaded by Iraq. So I got stranded and we were shipped back to India. So I lived with my aunt and my parents in this one room in my aunt's house for a year. And so then I started my chartered accountancy. I joined Pricewaterhouse and began my studying chartered accountancy, which is equivalent of CPA. I had an arranged marriage. I had have a beautiful son from that marriage who's with me now in the States, and he's studying medicine. And that marriage lasted for 7 years, and got divorced, moved to the States to do my Ph.D. here. So got my Ph.D. in marketing. And now I'm happily married to an American, and I'm studying, researching, teaching mindfulness.
Thank you for explaining that. So what did you learn from living in different countries?
I think I was very fortunate to be part of the Indian culture. What I really treasure there is that sense of community, family, generosity. And I just learned that very early on that generosity did not have anything to do with material wealth. And I saw that in my grandmother, who was a school teacher because her husband didn't work. He was an alcoholic. And so she was a school teacher, became a principal. So she was really my role model because she never, ever complained. And she was always so happy. And whatever she got, gifts or, sweets or little gifts on Diwali or whatever, she was always sharing it with people. So I saw her giving away stuff and being so happy. So from a very young age, I made that association that giving and generosity is just, it just makes me happy to be able to share things and share the abundance in my life. So that was a very important lesson, I think, I learned in the hospitality and the open-heartedness of being part of that culture. And I've seen that even now when we go back and visit with my husband, who's American. And so we try and show him different cities in India. So we went to Varanasi and Banaras. And, there were all these little homes. It's for people who don't know, Benares is one of the most ancient living cities. So they still have those narrow lanes and those houses built. And we were really intrigued about the houses. And we're like, what do they look like from inside? So we just randomly knocked on someone's door and we're like, is it possible for us to come and look inside your home? And they were like just so hospitable. And they were like, of course, come on in. And they were like, did a whole tour of their home. And, there was no awkwardness about it. Like in America, I would still be open and I do bring in random people to my home, to our home. But generally, it's like not a done thing. You can't just knock at someone's door and say like, oh, can we come and take a tour of your home? So I think I really love that about living there. And now in Kuwait, what did I learn? Kuwait was just, I feel like I developed a sense of safety. It was a very safe place and it was kind of like a bubble. I did grow up in this safe, loving bubble. That's what I remember most of. And it's where my father really got a chance to prosper and grow. So I have really fond memories of that. And just, I think, one thing that I did learn is seeing how different cultures, we can judge them when we don't know about them. Like, for example, people judge how women in the Middle East wear the burqa and they cover their whole body and face, and they can be like, oh, how do they live like that? And having lived over there, I grew up really respecting the fact that that's how they grew up. That is a very important belief for them to live in that way. And so I think it made me very accepting and not judging of being too quick to judge, oh, how could that person be like that? So I think I learned to respect different cultures having grown up there. And do you want me to talk about America too?
Sure.
Well, interestingly, America is where I found my spirituality and mindfulness. So having, people go to India to discover mindfulness and spirituality. And it's when I was taken away from my culture and my family, and I'm very, very close to my family. So when I moved here with my son, he was 6. And so when he went away to school and I was like left all alone at home and trying to figure out my life, and I'd gone through a divorce by then, that's when I started asking those questions like, oh, what happened? How did that happen? Like, I followed all the rules in my life. I was a good daughter, why did I go through the divorce? What happened? And when I started asking those questions, I just found that when I would breathe and kind of just quiet my mind and ask that question, I would have these insights and answers like dropping in. And I think that was kind of my informal start of meditation in the middle of these trees and the middle of nature. I felt like nature and trees were answering all these questions for me. that I had. And then I wanted to learn mindfulness, meditation formally, and started getting deeper into it. So yes, I think all the different cultures are very much part of who I am.
Going back to when you were asking those questions after your
Mm-hmm.
divorce, do you remember some of the specific questions that you asked yourself?
Yeah, I think a big one was why me? So I had a very difficult time during and after divorce. And so one of the questions was just like, why me? Why did I suffer so much? I've been a very obedient, like I grew up in a very loving culture and family. And at the same time, there were a lot of, I studied in a convent in Kuwait. And it was in my generation, women didn't date or have boyfriends. So I kind of like I said, my first marriage was arranged. I had met my ex-husband just twice when I said yes to him. He proposed the first time he met me after meeting meeting me for 2 hours. And I had another opportunity to meet him again, and I decided to say yes. So I really didn't know much about life because it was so protected and we weren't expected to have a lot of experiences. So I guess, yeah, those were some of my questions that, hey, I followed all the rules that I was taught growing up. And how come I ended up with a divorce? And it was so awful and so sad. I ended up causing a lot of grief to my parents, which I didn't want. So even though I was a good person, I ended up causing a lot of suffering to other people. And so those were the kind of questions I had.
What did you learn from your divorce, if you don't mind talking about that?
What I learned was so many years after. It's like I was in my 20s when I got married and divorced. And I think it's really in my late 40s when I really realized, and that's way after I'd been meditating and so forth. So every stage of my growth through meditation revealed different, it was like like layers of onions, right? Like I thought like the first time I had a breakthrough, I was like, wow, now I'm enlightened. Now I've figured it all out. And then you just keep life keeps throwing more things at you, and then you keep learning more and more. So it was only in my 40s that I think one of the biggest things that I learned was about my deep conditioning as an Indian woman, and how that led me to make decisions putting other people before my own needs, which is not a bad thing if you can really take care of and nurture other people, which is a beautiful aspect of my upbringing. And yet, when I only take care of other people and don't take care of my own needs, like I was obviously born with a lot of gifts, and every human being is, right? We each have come in with, like, you probably have the gift of interviewing and doing podcasts and connecting with people. And so each of us have these gifts. And if we don't honor them, don't honor that voice inside of us that is wanting us to show up and go out. And so my gift is, or what I enjoy doing, what inspires me is learning about the human mind and sharing my insights through writing and teaching. But that was being squelched as an Indian wife and woman because I was expected to stay at home, not travel, or put my family before me. So at every point I was giving up my career to accommodate the family. And I didn't even realize I was doing that till my 40s, when I realized that, oh my God, I did not even know I was doing that. So how could I have changed it? And by then I had a Ph.D. So you would think that with all the degrees and I was successful, I had published research and I was independent financially, that I would be thinking differently. But no, that those beliefs that we take on early on are so strong, and they become the lens through which we experience the world. And that's the lens I was using to make all my decisions. So in my 40s, I was able to see that lens. And then once I could see it, I was like, oh my God, now how do I change that? And it's so ever since I've been working on it, because even now I catch glimpses, my default is to like cancel a date out with my friends. I'm like, oh, but what will my husband do at home? He's a grown up. He can take care of himself. But my immediate thought is like, oh, but I can't leave my husband behind. That's my first thought. And so slowly and slowly, I'm starting to shift that way of thinking. And yeah, so it's much better now.
This cultural conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
which is ingrained in all of us since the time we were born. So, do you think, is it not just in the Indian culture? It could be in any culture?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that, because I don't want this to sound like this is just my story. Because now I work with CEOs, I work with insurance executives, very successful people, and I work with college students. I work with all nationalities, all cultures, all age groups. And guess what? We all have the same mind. And what I mean by that is we all obviously have different values or cultural upbringings and whatnot. But in the end, we're all wired to respond to things in a similar way. And so our conditioning might be different, but whatever that conditioning was growing up, that's the lens that is limiting each of us from experiencing the world in the fullest sense. So, for example, I'm thinking of an example, trying to think of an example of, okay, just a recent one, like right now with the COVID going on, right? I'm working, one of the participants in my class is a very successful professor, and she's super smart and very independent, intelligent. And so in talking with her through this class, we discovered together how her default beliefs about her role as a professor in this time was creating this extra stress in her and making her behave in a way that was really not effective and not helpful to anyone. So it was like her belief of how she should be performing that role was impacting her choices. And when she could see that that's the belief and that's just an assumption, it's not reality, she could then choose differently. I don't know if that's clear
Mhm.
enough,
It
but
is. So, how should someone, and as a listener to this
mm-hmm.
podcast, I'm thinking, how should I work on my eliminating beliefs which are not serving me? What are the practices?
Well, one, you can wait for my book because I'm writing a book right now, which should be out in December. And two, I teach a class online for now, so it's available to everyone. And the title, and really, it's not something new. If you really do the work of mindfulness in the traditional sense of how any of our teachers like Mirabai and Joseph Goldstein, or there's so many teachers right now who really learned from the ancient wisdom, from the Buddhist teachings, and now they're bringing it into the secular world. So I've just learned so much from them and from my own experiences and from neuroscience. So any of these classes, and why I mention working with teachers is because there's so many apps right now, and people feel they can read a book or use an app and that would help. I think they help to some degree, but it's incomplete because most of the apps are just teaching you to meditate, and meditation is just the first step. And really, it's the first step to calm the mind, to open our hearts, and then the real work of disrupting our beliefs happen. So what I would suggest to people is that, so I use the word reset. So
Mm-hmm.
I invite people to reset their minds every day, several times a day. So what I mean by that is the first step, the 3 steps to reset. you can call that whatever you want, okay? But I'm just using the word reset.
Mm-hmm.
So in the reset, you reset your mind in 3 steps. The first step is you refresh your mind with a meditation or whatever you need to refresh your mind, to calm your mind and to open and disrupt, whatever is going on. So you can do a brief meditation. You can take a few breaths right now. You can do jumping jacks, whatever it is that will help you to disrupt that go mind and to really find that stillness and stability inside and create that spaciousness in your mind. So that's the first step. The second step then is to ask, what are my intentions for the situation, for this day? So it's about realigning with your intentions. Even like we're having this podcast. So before I entered the podcast, I will ask myself, instead of just leaving my last job and then just jumping into the podcast and then just going on default, I take a moment to stop and I'm like, okay, take a few breaths or go for a walk. And then I'm like, okay, what are my intentions for this podcast? And then I'm able to look at what is stopping me from acting on those intentions. So I check in with my assumptions, my beliefs, my thoughts. So you're creating a little bit more space after your meditation. The second step, which is the disrupt your mind, is you disrupting your default thinking by realigning with your intention and by checking in what are some assumptions or thoughts that are happening right now. So you're examining your thoughts with kindness, with compassion, with curiosity, even playfulness. And then you can see, like, is my thought aligned with my intention or not? And then the third step is to take action and take skillful action. So then I can show up on the podcast or the meeting or whatever project I'm starting in a way where my thoughts, my speech, and my actions are aligned with my intentions.
So this is a framework to reset our mind. And you mentioned that meditation is one of the practices. So I would love to ask you that, how did you discover meditation in your life?
In the trees, with the trees, amongst the trees. We're going back to when I was sitting here and I just moved back from India. Actually, maybe I'm going to speculate. Okay, so my formal discovery or informal discovery of meditation was when I moved from India, and I mentioned I had those questions. So I would be alone at home. I would sit out in nature with the trees and I'd be like, take a few breaths. And it was just intuitively, I was being guided somehow. Like I just knew intuitively that if I take a few breaths, I find that my mind slows down a little bit, which now we know from neuroscience that breathing does have that impact. It, kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system so we can think more clearly. And so there was some scientific basis to it. So that was my informal introduction to mindfulness. And then I realized, okay, this thing is really good. It works. So I ended up at a shamanic retreat in Costa Rica. That was my first spiritual breakthrough, where several layers of my conditioning, I feel, just broke through a shamanic ceremony. And I was able to, for the first time, see that who I thought I was, I'm not. And so, I thought I was this Indian woman with these beliefs. I'm a daughter, I'm a mother. And through that shamanic process, I was able to become a witness to my different voices. And that was my first experience of seeing that. And it was actually a very scary journey if you know anything about shamanism. And
not to interrupt you here, could you explain
yes.
What is shamanic for our listeners?
Of course. So it's South American indigenous people that was their spiritual way of connecting. They were shamans, were the medicine people. They were the healers. And in the modern world, there still continue to be shamans who help people through the ceremony, through using herbs. And so there's a particular one involved, ayahuasca, which is a hallucinogen. And I did not grow up with hallucinogens or, smoking pot or any of that.
Are
So
you
it was like
talking about psychedelic?
yeah, it's like a psychedelic. And so I was fresh from India and I don't even drink alcohol. I don't do, I didn't grow up in the pot culture. So it was like a whole new thing that for me, because we just ended up there in Costa Rica to take part in the shamanic ceremony. I'm like, yay, I want to transcend my ego. That's what it was advertised. So I was like, sure, let's do it. And when we got there, they started explaining to us that there is this ritual and it's all night long and you're going to be drink ayahuasca. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting into? And so at that time, I did go through there was a thought, a very strong thought, which is like, oh, no, you're not going to do this. And in that moment, I actually disrupted that thought. I'm like, who's saying that? And I'm here for a reason and I'm going to go through it. So that was actually one of the bravest things I've done in my life, to be in the middle of a forest with 100 strangers and be part of this ceremony in the forest where we drank ayahuasca. And the purpose of that is it helps people see their own ego and people go through their own journey to transcend. And then by the end of it, transcend the, or go through the transformation you're meant to go through. So in that process, I actually went through a very scary journey at night. I was full of fear. It felt like I was dying. And I know it sounds really crazy. However, that particular experience changed my life. And because by the end of that journey, I fought all through the night, resisting my fear, fighting my fear, using my logic, my mind. I was an academic. I was in the Ph.D. program at the time. So I used all my mental faculties to fight that fear, and it didn't go away. And I remember at 5 a.m, I finally just surrendered to the fear. I'm like, fine, just take me wherever. I surrender. And in that moment of surrender, my entire fear just melted away. My mind just went so quiet. And in that instant, I just had that realization that the mind that I valued so much is not it. There's something much more than the mind that I use in my everyday life. And that really was a moment where I just gave away so much of my past conditioning, just kind of washed away. And that became actually the topic of my dissertation in marketing, which was about multiple selves and the dialogical self. And I started studying Kristen Neff's work because I was looking at the internal dialogue that we have. I looked at compassion as a form of inner dialogue. And so anyway, long story short, that was the life-changing meditation experience I had in the jungles of Costa Rica. And it became my dissertation. It got published. My dissertation got published in the top marketing journal, Journal of Consumer Research. And it landed me an amazing job as a business professor at the University of Utah Business School.
You mentioned that you were fearful of certain things. What were you fearful of, Shalini?
You mean in the journey itself?
Yes.
Okay, so in the journey, because it's a hallucinogen and I had no experience of it before that, it felt like I was being asked to jump into oblivion. Like there was this darkness and I was on a roller coaster, and this roller coaster was going to end in me jumping into the darkness, which was like a void or oblivion. And so obviously I did not want to jump into that. So I was resisting that all through the night and fighting that fear that this is not real. This is all in my head, but it was still feeling very real in my body, and my body was cold and I was shivering. And there were healers there, so they knew that many people go through this journey. So I was being supported through this journey, but it was still my own journey. And it's only when I surrendered, when I stopped resisting the fear and I faced it, I'm like, fine, take me wherever you want to take me. It's so interesting. And that realization is at the heart of all of our mindfulness teaching, right? Where we resist discomfort of any sort when there's change, or like even with things that are not expected, like the pandemic. And no doubt the pandemic is causing a lot of real suffering for a lot of real people. So I don't mean to downplay that in any way. But no matter what our circumstances are, if we turn towards fears, our discomfort, and we turn towards it in a very compassionate, kind, curious way, we will find that there are so many more possibilities. We'll find that there are many more ways to look at that situation that can lead us to a solution. But if we resist it, and that's the human tendency that I said that we all have in common, is that we are wired for survival. So any discomfort, change, basically on default, our brain is resisting it. And the more we resist it, because we haven't solved the problem, we're just resisting it and not looking at it. So it just becomes bigger and bigger.
Could you give us an example, recent example from your life, or any recent discomfort that you faced, you were able to overcome with compassion, kindness, and curiosity?
Absolutely, so many. I'm the queen of discomfort now, of embracing discomfort. So I excel at that now. So a recent one is, as you might know, I'm also in the town council, which is our local government. So I'm one of the 13 members of the town council. And we have, as you know, we all worldwide have the pandemic, health crisis, but there's also social crisis with the killing of George Floyd. I think it really acted as another wake-up call for everyone that there is huge problems in our society, in the way not just a police force works, but at every level, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's economic opportunities, there are huge gaps. And so even in our little town of Amherst, there was a lot of upheaval and residents coming to the town council, like 100 people coming and saying, you all are racist. If you don't take any action right now, you need to defund the police. You need to cut the police budget by 52%. And, so in the middle of those meetings, and these meetings can go on till 1:00 in the morning. So they start at 6:30 in the evening, and this is like happening at 10:30. You've had a long day, you're exhausted, you're depleted. And then you have like a lot of people coming in and like sort of blaming us and yelling at us for not doing what they think we should do. And as a council, we have to look at, all aspects, all the residents, and we have to make decisions in a thoughtful way. So we want to do the right thing, but we can't just do what people are wanting us to do. So there was a lot of like emotions in the room, and we're sitting there, and in my mind, I could feel my body tightening, and I'm like, no, they're wrong. This is not right. Oh no, that's not true at all. So like in my mind, I'm judging what's being said, and I was like shutting down. So I kind of in that moment reminded me, okay, time to reset. So I take a few breaths. I actually close my eyes because it's Zoom meeting. So I could close my eyes, and I took a few breaths, and I was like, okay, what are my intentions for this meeting? And my intentions were to listen to the people and to really listen out for people who normally don't speak up. What is their suffering? And to help the council, help all of us to come up with solutions that will make the lives of all residents better, right? So those are my intentions. But how was I acting, and what was my thoughts? My thoughts were like, nope, not true. I don't agree. And I was shutting down. So now that I had realigned with my intention, I was like, okay, now I can open. What do I need? What mindfulness skill do I need right now to be able to really listen and not get defensive in my head? So I pulled in compassion, I pulled in curiosity, and I'm like, okay, now listen with an open mind and heart. And you don't have to this is not about me being a good person. This is about the people. So I, shifted my orientation to the people. And honestly, it just changed my whole experience because now I was just listening to people for the sake of solving their problems. And it wasn't about me. It wasn't about, oh, I'm working so hard. Why are they being so mean to me? Why are they so angry? I'm doing all the right things. I teach mindfulness. Like I could make any number of stories in my head to defend myself that I'm a good person. But the point is, this is not about me. It's about the people who are suffering. So that's really an example of how, even with the meditation, I've been meditating for 15 years now, the mind still wants to defend me, right? And so if I don't actively look at that, then, and I don't disrupt that pattern in the middle of it, I could have gone in a very different way. I would have, if I hadn't disrupted and checked in with my intention, I would have been more defensive and I would have been listening, but not really. I would have been preparing arguments to maybe just suppress my emotions and just say, like, pretend I'm listening, but actually I'd be like, nope, I do not agree with you. Thank
Because
you.
reacting is our default response.
Yeah, it is. It is.
If we take your mindfulness quiz, Shalini, can we embrace more mindfulness? Can we embrace more discomfort in our lives?
I wish it was as simple as that, but I would say it is a good first step. So, based on my own trainings and then my own life, where I was finding there's a gap between my meditation practice and then when I get triggered in the middle of situations, whether it's a conversation with my husband and he says something and I get triggered, or with my son, I have expectations of how he should be, or, in town council, so at work. So I was finding that there was this gap between the meditation and the actual practice of mindfulness in my life, which led me to dig deeper into the teachings. And I found Joseph Goldstein's translation of the Satipatthana Sutra, which is the mindfulness discourse that the Buddha gave. And I found that really helpful. And what I realized in that was that in the West, as we're teaching secular mindfulness, a lot of the focus is on the meditation. And of course, we do want people to integrate that and the benefits of meditation. Of course, they do impact people, like as we're seeing all the research right now. And yet, when the Buddha taught that, he was very smart. He's a cool dude. He was super smart.
Yes.
So he figured out that just meditation isn't going to cut it, right? Because we're wired so deeply. Like I just shared, we're wired to react. So what he said was that if you really want to be liberated from your own suffering, you need the meditation, but you also need to, throughout the day, keep checking in with your intentions, and so that you have that directionality. Otherwise, we can get so easily distracted, right? I mean, so our intention might be, oh, I want to work on my book, but in between there's an email, there's this, there's that, and we get distracted. So he was very smart. He said, keep checking in. What are your intentions? Where are you heading? How do you want to live your life? How do you want to show up? And so keep checking in with your intentions and keep cultivating the wisdom. Develop the right wisdom, right understanding about situations instead of just reacting. Make sure you understand your beliefs, your assumptions, and see what's possible. And then the third training that he talked about was in terms of what is called sila in Pali language, in which the Buddha taught. Sila means ethical conduct, or I like to think of it as skillful actions, which is you have to practice the skillful speech, skillful thoughts, skillful actions throughout the day. So by skillful, I mean anything that promotes well-being of everyone involved. So throughout the day, I need to keep checking in. Are my thoughts wholesome? Are they productive? Are they aligned with my intentions? Is my speech aligned with my intentions? Are my actions and livelihood, are they aligned with my intentions? So all of these three trainings, which is the basically what became the reset practice, is you have the meditation, you have the cultivation of the wisdom, and the actual skillful actions. All three of them work together.
Is it possible that we skip meditation and just focus on the intention part?
That's a great question. In my own experience, I find that if I don't meditate for a few days, and I do the reset, and I can just do a quick, let's just take a few breaths and then check in with the intentions and so forth, that somehow we get caught up by the world's busyness and attachments and projects and whatnot. And so I become more agitated and there's not that much spaciousness. So it almost feels like even if you take 5 minutes for your meditation, it's kind of like going to the gym, right? Like when we exercise, we can say that, okay, we don't need to exercise. Can I just eat healthy and be very intentional about what I'm eating? And can I still be healthy? But the idea is you need to still move your body a little bit, like whether it's through walking or yoga or stretching or swimming, but you still need to move your body a little bit to keep the muscles strong and agile. The same way I feel like the meditation does that for the mind, where it makes the brain a little more agile and strengthens the resilience, so that when life takes over, like a new project comes up, immediately the human mind is going to want that project to go well. Like, I want this podcast, to be amazing. I want you to love me. I want people who are going to listen to love me. And so that's an automatic reaction, right? And we create attachments. And when we're busy, we just start working harder and having more of these attachments and expectations that everything we're doing, we're working so hard that everything should go the way that I want it to go. And of course, life doesn't always go the way we want it to go. And then we get disappointed and we beat ourselves up and we go into that spiral of, whatever. So I feel that meditation is what creates that resilience in the brain, so that when life hits us with disappointments or difficulties, that we have the resilience at that time to disrupt that and create space.
Love it. You have a blog on that as well, that meditation and awareness are not enough for a real change, but they are needed along with intention check, along with skillful action.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about meditation, you have over 250,000 plays on your guided meditation on the Insight Timer and Simple Habit app. So Shalini, what's your current meditation practice look like?
My favorite question. Okay, so I like to start in the morning with a reset, which includes, and this is something I'm working on. I'm not yet perfect at it, because my first thing, what do you do, Nishant, by the way? Like first thing when you wake up?
Well, so I meditate. So I remind myself about this quote that I don't remember where I read it. When you hesitate, then meditate.
Oh, so I love that.
I meditate for 23 minutes in 99.99% cases. And it's mix of breathing. It is a combination of breathing, silence, meditation. Thoughts come and go. And I try to imagine a light on my forehead. And sometimes I would use guided meditation from Dr. Joe Dispenza, or sometimes from Wayne Dyer. And after that, I do some yoga poses. And in the background, I will put some positive affirmations from Louis Hay.
Oh, wow. So you have a whole process in the morning to reset.
Yeah. Now coming back to you.
Okay, but is that the first thing you do? Like your eyes, you just open your eyes and you just get into
Okay,
meditation?
not right away. I know
Right.
I will drink water after 15,
Uh-huh.
20, after brushing my teeth. That is the
Okay.
first thing. And I've seen that if I do that, I feel
Mm,
great. And if I miss that, sometimes there is
right.
something which I feel missing.
Yeah.
It
Right.
helps.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm actually what I'm trying to do is a reset first thing in the morning because my hand normally just goes towards my phone and I want to check my emails or whatever. So now instead of reaching for the phone, even before like I open my eyes, like I've just woken up, I will say, okay, I'll just check in with my body and I'm like, okay, what are my intentions for today? Like, how do I want to show up in the world? And what is most important for me? So that's kind of like a morning reset I do, right? Then my husband gets me coffee and we drink coffee together. We try to go for a walk afterwards. And then after I come back from my walk is when I actually sit down. I have a little cave or if the weather's good, I'll sit outside. And so my meditations, when I try to do at least 30 to 40 minutes of meditation, and sometimes I just do it myself. Sometimes I listen to guided meditations. I listen to sometimes my own guided meditations, which is weird because I listen to my own voice. But it's helpful sometimes, you know. And then I love Joseph Goldstein's meditations, and the Dharma Seed has good ones. So then I'll do like a 30 to 40 minute. But generally, I check in with what I need, like what kind of mindfulness meditation I need. And actually, I don't think I responded to your earlier question about the 8 mindfulness skills quiz or assessment, because what I ended up learning also as part of my discovery of the Satipatthana Sutra and the mindfulness teachings was that the Buddha talked about these 7 liberation factors, and which it's the qualities of the mind that help us free ourselves from suffering, stress, our defaults, right? So, and even when I paid attention and started studying the different mindfulness aspects that all the different teachers are talking about, there was this commonality that there were these 8 mindfulness qualities that were coming up again and again. So so it broke down mindfulness into these 8 qualities, which include awareness. So we need awareness before anything else, right? That awareness that
Mhm.
I'm angry, aware that I'm sad, aware that I'm happy. So you first need to even be aware something is going on. And then awareness has to be accompanied with compassion. So you're kind to yourself and others. It includes that open mind. So you're curious, curiosity. And when there's to be curious, you need energy. You know, energy is like the effort needed to do something. To disrupt your default, you need that energy, which is the right effort. And along with that, we need appreciative joy or gratitude, because otherwise our mind, because of negativity bias, just goes towards what's wrong and what we're not doing right. So we also need to cultivate that mindset of gratitude. And then it includes inner calm, focus, and equanimity. So those are the 8 mindfulness skills or 8 qualities of the mind that we can cultivate through the meditations, through our practices every day, through the reset process. And so my practice then, coming back to the meditation question, is that I will check in, okay, what do I need right now? Do I need to build more open awareness? Do I need to build more focus? Because if I find my mind is really distracted, then I'll like be open awareness will lead to even more. It'll allow me to be more scattered. So in that on that day, I'll probably choose a focus practice or maybe an equanimity practice, which is cultivating unshakable quality of the mind.
What is that focus practice, Shalini?
So focus would be like where you're choosing a single object. So even within focus, I offer different meditation practices. Like you can focus on your body, or you can focus on the breath, or you can focus on the repetition of a mantra. So the idea of a focus practice is that you're training your mind to focus on a single object. It could be a candle, it could be that light you said in the top of your forehead, third eye, or so you're choosing a single object on which you're going to train your mind to keep coming back to.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm going to ask you something that I believe I've never asked anybody so far in my
Ooh.
podcast. Somebody reached out to me a few days before and he was asking about how we can work on our intrusive thoughts through mindfulness. And I didn't have the answer.
So the first thing I would invite the person is to bring that compassionate awareness to the language we use towards our own thoughts, right? So the word intrusive almost is like, oh, I don't want it. They're not invited, right? And so it's kind of like changing the language around that and not making them intrusive, but saying, oh, I'm curious about the thoughts that are coming. And then we can look at what is the causes and conditions that are promoting excessive thinking or thoughts from coming. So if there are a lot of thoughts that are coming, if they're coming, when I'm maybe trying to work on a project or something, and I find like, I'm being overwhelmed by the number of thoughts that are coming in. So I can take a few minutes, like the reset is like, first you take a few breaths to calm down, and then you turn your attention and curiosity like, oh, what are you trying to tell me thoughts? Like, what is the nature? Is there a repetition? Is it the same thoughts? Are there different thoughts? So you kind of engage with the thoughts, and then you might discover that the cause for the thoughts coming might be that you are concerned about something. Like maybe you're concerned like, oh, with COVID, I don't know what's going to happen with my job or my kids, their education. So you want to find out what are the causes of these thoughts coming up. And once you can see the cause, like it is, okay, I'm worried about my children's education. So you can't focus on your project because you're just worried about your kids. So then you can take care of that. But you need to understand what are the causes and conditions. That's that wisdom aspect that we're building, right? And once you know what the cause is, then you can solve the problem. And so that is one approach. But what do you think? What's coming up for you right now when you hear that?
So you were talking about solutions to solve the problems of intrusive thoughts. So what could be the solutions?
So once, let's say, assume that I'm concerned about my children's, because everything is online, will they get a good education or not? So if I'm concerned about that, then while I'm working, so let's say right now is my office time, and those thoughts are coming about my children. So what I would do is like, I have a running task list. So what I do is like, I will make a note, look into my child's education, and I would put it down on my to-do list, right? And that way you're telling your mind that, okay, I'm going to pay attention to that. I heard you, mind. Thank you for the reminder. You're right. I should look into my child's education. And you will tell the mind that, okay, right now is my time to focus on my job. And I've put it down. And once you write it down on your to-do list, then the mind doesn't feel like it needs to keep reminding you. And then you can say, okay, for now, let's put that aside and let me focus on my work. And then after your work time, then you can actually go and figure out, okay, can I solve this problem on my own? Or do I need to talk to my partner? Do I need to talk to friends who have kids the same age? Do I need to talk to the teacher? So that's where you're bringing in those qualities of mindfulness, which is of curiosity, of kindness to yourself, for your child. And also curiosity would be an important one to look at what are the resources that you have to solve that problem.
Great. Thank you so much, Shalini. It was a wonderful explanation. So before I ask you my last question, Shalini, I would love to ask you that. Do you have any favorite quote or life philosophy that you live by?
Oh, so I would say the most important one right now, they keep changing over time, but right now what's really prevailing for me, like having worked on my book and having gone to the discomfort of seeing the suffering in our world right now with social justice. And so there's a lot of suffering and discomfort. And even just writing a book can be so hard. And so with all these different angles to discomfort, I would say, and I was telling you, like, I'm the queen of discomfort. I think what's really been a lesson or practice for me has been to embrace my discomfort and to really welcome and befriend my discomfort and to look at it with compassion and investigate it. So if you don't mind, can I share this poem by Rilke? So Rilke
please.
Okay, great. So Rilke, he was a German poet, and a lot of his poetry really, really resonates with me. And I was recently listening to a book of his that I bought. I think I'll tell you the name later. But anyway, he talks a lot about life and death. And some people might think he's morose or it's dark. But I think by embracing the difficulty and the discomfort and death, even aspects of our existence, we're really learning to live more fully and fiercely. So in that vein, he has this poem which says, it's called, "Let this darkness be a bell tower. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself into wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow, and to the rushing water, speak, I am."
Love it. Great. Thank you, Shalini. So, last but not the least, where can our listeners learn more about your work?
Okay, so my website is knowyourmind.training.
Knowyourmind.training.
Yes, so it's not .com, it is knowyourmind.training.
Awesome. Thank you, Shalini. It was wonderful connecting with you.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. So once my book is done, let's talk again.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.